Hey there, and welcome to this in-depth case study where I want to walk you through how to ditch aches and pains, move with ease, and control your habits for a body and a life you love. Now, I know that is an audacious promise, and we don't have a whole lot of time here today. So I want to go ahead and dive right in. You might want to have something handy to take notes if you are the note-taking type, because in this training you're going to learn how a small shift in attention can help you master body tension and stress. You're also going to learn a simple mobility routine to help you move with more ease day to day. And I want to teach you how to intentionally shift your habits for the better. We'll see that willpower alone doesn't quite cut it. And over the years, I've learned that these are the three pillars of performance: awareness, natural movement, and intentional living. And that is exactly what I help my students implement in their own lives. See, I'm Chandler Stevens, and I'm a performance coach. And what I do is I help active people master their movement and mindset to move better, get stronger, and expand what they are capable of. Now, I have a decidedly unconventional approach, but it's been featured by some of the industry leaders in health and wellness, people like Functional Movement Systems and MoveNet, Lou Laura, Mike Reinold, TEDx. I'm a contributor at Breaking Muscle. I've been featured by Social Triggers and the Higher Performance Network. And that's all well and good, but what I love most of all is helping normal folks like you and me really expand what their bodies can do, start to take their life back through a dedicated movement practice. People like Erica. She's a yoga instructor out in DC, and she's a breast cancer survivor. And even though she was working with a kettlebell coach, they had hit a wall in her training. And she was still stuck with mobility restrictions and pain, despite all the stretching, all the foam rolling, all the band work they had done. And she says, in just 1 month's time, I've learned so much. It feels like I've discovered the missing pieces in my experience with my body, in my trainings as a yoga teacher and certified personal trainer. And people like Lauren. She's a Pilates instructor, and for a long time she had struggled with chronic pain. Despite trying everything she knew, she felt frustrated and stuck. And she says, I had been looking outside myself for the thing that would fix my problems. You helped me use movement and awareness to figure out what things in my body, my mind, and my life I needed to focus on. Now, these are fantastic stories, but the one I want to walk you through today is the story of a guy named James. And to give you a little backstory here, when I first met James, he had been to a physical therapist, he'd been to massage, he had even seen Feldenkrais practitioners, and he'd gotten craniosacral therapy as well. And so despite trying all of the conventional approaches, and even some of the unconventional ones, he still felt kind of stuck. As a computer science professor, he was stuck at a desk all day with chronic tension, despite everything he had tried. And so he came to me and thought, I can't give up on this. Is there any way you can help me? And I thought, well, yeah, there just might be. And so I want to walk you through exactly what we did and how you might start to implement these practices in your own life too. And so we started with that first of three pillars of performance. What we started with was awareness. And so what James and I worked through is we did a simple process to start to develop his body's built-in GPS. And you can think of it this way. You would not go on a long road trip without a GPS, or at the very least, a map. But, I mean, who the heck even uses maps these days? We want to start to develop a built-in GPS, an in-depth understanding of our own body in motion. And when we do that, we start to move with so much more ease, and aches and pains can start to melt away. And it starts with this idea of body awareness. And here's how this works. See, your brain and your body are in constant dialogue with each other. There is an ongoing feedback loop with your brain sending motor information out to the body, your body sending sensory information up to the brain, things like tension, compression, hot, cold, or pain. And your brain processes all of this information. And then again, it sends motor commands right back out. And so there's this ongoing loop. There's no real start or end to this process, but there is a constant dialogue. And so very often this starts to go under the level of conscious processing. But when we bring focused attention to it, when we cultivate body awareness, we can fine-tune this process. And so you can practice this right here, right now. What I worked on with James is a process called the body scan. And essentially we start with a pretty simple, really silly kind of question. Do you have a body? And it seems obvious on the surface. Yeah, of course I have a body. So our next question would be, well, how do you know? What signals is your body giving you to let you know it's there? How do you tell what's your body and what's external environment? What sensations are you aware of in your own body? As you're sitting here watching this training right now, where do you feel support underneath you? Do you feel pressure of your pelvis against the chair, the floor? Do you feel your feet underneath you? Do you notice any areas of tension or pain in the body? As you breathe in and out, what starts to move with each exhalation and each inhalation? This is the subtle sensory information that your brain uses to really generate your reality, generate your understanding of the world. We learn through our bodies, first and foremost. And so when you can bring these sensory signals to the level of conscious attention, again, you can start to fine-tune that dialogue between brain and body. Really clarify it, crisp it up, and start to move better and find more ease. And so that's awareness. That's our first pillar of performance. Bringing awareness to the body through this conscious process of the body scan. And so James had been practicing this for a little while, and we started to add in another practice here of natural movement. And what we focused on in particular is keeping the joints healthy. And when he did that, he unlocked huge reserves of mobility and of fluid movement. And so what he would do is scan through the body. He would go through that body scan process and notice which areas were tense. And one of his biggies was the neck. And maybe you relate to this, that we carry a lot of tension in our necks. And so I'd say, okay, well, if we're aware of that tension, let's go in and change that. Again, if we have this constant dialogue of brain and body, if we start to work with the body in this step, we can improve the quality of the information the brain is getting. Think of it this way. If you have crappy information coming in, you're going to get crappy outputs on the other side. And so with a practice of natural movement, we can improve that sensory signaling going up to the brain. And this is like a neuromuscular cheat code here. We can start to tweak with this dialogue in the brain and the body to start to move better and find a lot more ease. And so here's what we did. We focused on controlled joint rotations. And so in James's case, his neck carried a lot of tension. And I would say, okay, James, here's what we're going to do to start out. I want you to curl your head forward, bringing your chin down to your chest, actively reaching your head as far as you can in that range of motion, and keep the rest of the body pretty still, pretty isolated. You might then take the head backwards, starting to look up and overhead, actively reaching the head back. And you might go through that forward and backward 3 to 5 times. Then what you could do is take one ear over to a shoulder, and then take the other ear over to the other shoulder. And so we start to take the head right and left. And again, you could go through that 3 to 5 times. And then we can put all of that together, and we can actively rotate the head in big sweeping circles around the neck, rotating once in each direction, maybe alternating directions in between. And you might go 3 to 5 rotations here as well, actively reaching your head through its fullest range of motion, as big a sweeping arc as you can, keeping the rest of the body isolated. And then you could come back to neutral and check back in with your awareness here. And I would say, okay, so James, your neck was tense at the start of that. Has anything shifted? And more often than not, he'd say, well, yeah, okay, the neck feels a lot looser. I'm noticing my shoulder is a little tense now. And so here's the beauty of it. You can combine these two principles, body awareness and natural movement, and you can go down through the body and basically hunt around for those positions of tension. Sense through your body, and then if you find an area of tension, rotate it. The simple rule of thumb is move any part of your body that you can move as much as you can move it. And so we would go through this joint by joint from head to shoulders, shoulder blades, down into the hips, into the ankles, into the wrists. And it was all informed by that baseline of awareness he had developed. And so you put these two together, and he had a simple 10-minute routine he could use throughout the day to flip the switch anytime he noticed there was tension in his body. He could scan through his body, start to highlight that tension, and then go through controlled joint rotations at that level to release that tension, hit reset. And that wasn't even the best part. Here's where that leads. As he practiced this over a couple of weeks, again, not a whole lot of time, 10 minutes or so each day for a couple of weeks, he came in with a whole new understanding of his body. And he said, "Hey, Chen, I'm realizing more and more at the end of each workday, all of my weight is on my left foot, and I'm really hunched forward. Is there anything we could do to kind of address that?" And I said, well, yeah, you better believe it. We can get to our third pillar of performance here, intentional living. And so once James could notice things in his life that contributed to his problems, he could consciously shift them. See, even though we have these grand, lofty ideas of where we want to end up, we want to move better, we want a life that looks like XYZ, we don't control a whole lot of our future. In fact, the early mind-body educator F.M. Alexander said it best: people don't decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. And this is pretty key. We can control our behaviors. We can control our habits. And over time, our habits start to build our futures. And so with that in mind, I introduced James to a bit of an equation. And this is called Lewin's equation. It was developed by a behavioral psychologist. And basically we have this simple equation, B equals FP comma E. And to help decipher this a bit more, it means behavior is a function of a person within an environment. Our behaviors are made up of our interactions with our environment. So essentially nothing we do is fixed. It's all based in context. You don't live in a vacuum. Your surroundings really influence your behaviors each day. And so here's what we ended up doing. We went through a process that I call hacking your habitat. And I said, okay, James, we have this behavior we want to change, this hunch at the end of the day, leaning over on the left side. We've now thought of a behavior we want to change. That's step one. Step two is identifying where this behavior comes up. And so for James, it was in his office at work. Step three, we started to list out the environmental conditions, the factors of his environment that might be influencing his behavior. And so in James's case, it was things like the ergonomic chair he sat in. It was the computer monitor setup. He was wearing shoes. There was slightly dim lighting overhead. We went through as many environmental factors as we could think of. And then here's the biggie. I asked him for step four, I said, okay, James, which of these factors do you think has the biggest impact? Or which ones are the easiest to test? Because we're going to run a couple of experiments here and see if we can influence your behavior with environmental tweaks. And so James said, okay, well, I think my shoes might influence it. I could feel my feet better if I tried typing barefoot for a day. And I might be able to switch out my chair as well. And so I said, okay, well, James, here's how we're going to set this up. And here's how you might set this up yourself. We have two variables to test. Day one, you try typing without shoes. Day two, maybe you switch out the chair you sit on for a stool, or maybe you stand for a day to type or sit on the floor. And then day three, you try barefoot and type in a different chair. And it's crazy. These sound like simple little things, but James found that as he implemented them, even within a week, he had a lot less tension, he was more confident, and he felt more empowered to take control of his circumstances. See, he realized, and you are probably catching on to this yourself here, you can change your environment. And in doing so, you can change your behaviors. And when you change your behaviors like that, our bodies start to shift as well. And so we can find a freedom from aches and pains. We can start to move better simply by hacking our habitats in this manner. And now, here's where it gets crazy. Unlike other gurus out there who say, those garbage caveats of, these results are not typical and blah, 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 These results might seem extraordinary, but they're actually pretty common among the students I work with. This is pretty par for the course once we have a good system in place. Take other James, for example. Two guys named James, both with, pretty tremendous results. James was a golf pro with Nike, and he had a botched knee surgery. They had to go back in a separate surgery and clean up the mess of the first one. And so he was stuck with this chronic pain, this kind of learned pain behavior. And so we ended up only working together for a couple of weeks, and James said, all of these areas of my body and mind are getting increasingly better every day. I now know that the pain wasn't in my head, so I feel entirely validated. My confidence is growing. I'm not broken. That's huge. He's not broken. For so long he had felt stuck there, and he's realizing it's not all in your head. Or take Pamela, for example. She says, my whole life is different. My awareness of how I do things and move my body has grown 110%. I'm happy to report my knees have more mobility and less pain, and that's a big deal to me. Chandler shares his vast knowledge of movement, somatics, and play in such a way that made me realize I am much more capable than I thought. Or take Nate. He says, before working together, I suffered and struggled with pain in my shoulder from an injury years before. The movements you taught me were completely different than I was doing on the machines at the gym. Not only were they easier on my body, they provided results with much less time. It's amazing what can happen when you are taught how and why the body works and reacts. Mind officially blown. And so, these are tremendous results, but they are not unique. They come from following this same system I've been sharing with you today. And I think you could be next. See, I know you're here because you aren't satisfied with what your body can do. You want more strength, you want more mobility, more fluid movement. You want to be able to carry yourself through the world with more confidence. So what's holding you back here? Over the years and over hundreds of conversations with people, I've realized it's one of three things that tends to hold us back from a body and a life we love. Oftentimes we lack clarity of direction. We don't quite know where we want to end up. We have this vague idea of success, but we're not exactly sure what it looks like or why it's so important to us. We often lack consistency of action. We'll dive hard into a plan with high intensity for a couple of weeks and then things will fizzle out. We'll get frustrated, we'll hit a bump in the road, and we're inconsistent. This leads to that up and down cycle, on and off, that gets us nowhere. I spun my wheels like this for years. Or maybe we just don't have accountability of our progress. Maybe we don't have someone in our corner, someone who's on our team through the ups and the downs. And I'm telling you, one conversation can change everything. One conversation with my mentor actually changed everything too. She really, the first time we met, she called me out on all of the bullshit I had built up around my goals and my progress. She laid bare these kind of false myths I had told myself, these false stories I was telling myself. And she highlighted just how much I was capable of. She really showed me how much of my potential I was just squandering. And that simple conversation totally changed the direction of my life. And I want that for you too. I have 5 openings for one-on-one students in the next coming months. And if you're watching this, you're probably a good candidate. See, I only work with a select few number of people. I only work with folks who are growth-oriented and who appreciate the process. I work with people who are passionate, whether it's about gardening or fitness or, heck, even data science. If it gets you going, I want to know there's something that drives you. I work with people who are ready to show up and do the work. I know you don't need someone to hold your hand. You don't need just a cheerleader in your corner. You can do the stuff if someone helps you out along the way. I know that. And I work with people who are excited to dive deep, to lean into their edge, and to embrace their potential. And so if that sounds like you, here's what happens next. I'm going to set aside an hour of my day to have an open conversation with you. The purpose is to help me get to know you better, to learn what you're struggling with, where you want to end up, and I want to help you develop a game plan to get from point A to point B. And look, whether or not we decide to work together, you're going to leave with a powerful plan of action to expand what you're capable of. Now, I value my time and I value yours, so there is a brief application to be considered. You can click below to apply. And I want to be clear, this is not some sleazy hard sell situation. When I choose to work with someone, I want us to mutually agree that, hell yeah, this is something we want to continue with. If there is any hesitation, we're not going to continue. So I want to be clear that this first conversation is just that. It's a conversation. And if it isn't a perfect fit, then we both go on our separate ways and, no hard feelings. So now the big question is, why are you still here? What are you working toward? And why aren't you there yet? I think we can uncover the answer to each of these in one simple conversation. So I encourage you, go ahead and apply below. And I look forward to talking with you.